Hi everyone, welcome back to Literature Analysis Walkthrough. This is part 2 of Lesson 5, your body paragraphs, your argument development. In the previous lesson, we talked about the tell, show, explain requirements, and I gave you some very useful tips on how to generate ideas for each of these requirements. Now we are going to walk through a complete essay, and I'll show you how all of those requirements fit together. The title of the essay is Character in Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants and Marquez's One of These Days. In my introduction video, I walked through the 4 essential components of a literature analysis introduction paragraph. I'm not going to do that now. I'll just refresh your memory. In fiction, readers can learn much about a protagonist by witnessing how they react to a crisis. In fact, writers often seem to present such crises specifically to test the quality and nature of the protagonist's character. This seems to be the case in the short stories Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway and One of These Days by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Each of the main protagonists in these stories is faced with a potentially life-changing decision, and despite their equally powerless status, Marquez's character demonstrates more independence and strength of character. That's the thesis statement, and again, in one of my previous videos, I went into detail about thesis statement, so check that out. Okay, let's get into the body. Okay, before we start reading it, I just want to draw your attention to these guys. The analysis vocabulary are the things that I've highlighted here. Those will be found in these documents. If you remember previous videos, take a screenshot of these. You need this kind of vocabulary in order to do tell, show, explain, in order to put the form together with the content. If you don't know what that form equals content means, then go back to my previous videos. Okay, screenshot that. You need it. And the underlined stuff, as you'll see here, are these linking phrases early in the story from the beginning. Those kinds of linking phrases, if you'll remember, I talked about those in one of my previous videos as well. So let's get into the guts. In Hills Like White Elephants, Jig, the female protagonist, must decide with her partner whether or not to have an abortion. Hemingway makes clear from the beginning that this puts the couple at a junction in their relationship. On this side there was no shade and no trees, and the station was between 2 lines of rails in the sun. The fact that the couple is between 2 lines implies that they have reached a fork in the road of their relationship and a decision must be made. The setting also contains no shade, pointing to the fact that the core of the relationship is now laid bare. There is nowhere for the couple to hide, and this decision will have serious consequences. Similarly, Marquez lets his readers understand the seriousness of the crisis early in the story. As his son announces the arrival of the mayor, Aurelio the dentist has no choice but to help the tyrannical, murderous strongman. He says if you don't pull out his tooth, he'll shoot you. Okay, so where's my first tell? My first tell is right here. That's my claim. As a writer of this essay, I believe that Hemingway wants us to understand that the relationship is on the rocks, and he wants us to understand this early. How did I get there? Well, I looked at the form. Remember my previous lessons, I said the writer gives us form, and we have to decode the form. We have to figure out what he means by the symbols. And so when I was reading the first couple of paragraphs of the whole story, I found these. There's no shade. Remember the question I asked you to think about? Why A, why not B? Why is there no shade? Why isn't it simply sun? Why isn't there shade? Why isn't there like just nice breezy sunny day and it's beautiful and calm and moderate? Everything's moderate. No, it's not moderate. It's not very pleasant. There's no shade and there's no trees. And they're between 2 lines of rails in the sun. So it's not very pleasant and they are between something. So how do you unpack that? Remember I said, make your claim. I sense that this is true. And I sensed that it was true because I read this. And now you dig into that blue stuff for your explain. You dig into that and you say, well, what do all these things suggest? And there we go. The fact that the couple is between 2 lines implies, and there's our vocabulary. Okay? So this is the model that you want to follow. The tell, show, explain. Red, blue, purple, if you want to color up your own stuff to make sure you're on track. That might be useful, but that's what you want. Now, I want to point out one thing at the end here. You'll notice that I don't have any purple at the end here. Now, that's fine if you know what you're doing. It's not fine grade 10, grade 11, no. Make sure you got the red, the blue, and the purple. Your teachers are specifically looking for this because it's their job to make sure that you understand the explain part. And as I mentioned before, these 2 things are quite simple. Harry Potter's a nice guy, and we know that because he gave Ron candy. Every grade 5 student can do that, okay? Grade 5 students can't do the explain part nearly as well. Okay, so make sure this works because it's actually quite obvious, but you can't argue with your teacher and say, well, I didn't need the explain part because this is obvious. Your teacher's going to say, no, put in the explain. This is a comparison contrast essay, as I mentioned, and very often we use this particular structure for that kind of synthesis paper. In the first body paragraph, you might establish what two works have in common, and in the second body paragraph, you talk about A, and in the last body paragraph, you talk about B. Okay, so let's read through body paragraph B, the Hemingway story. The question now is, okay, so they established in the first paragraph that both characters in both stories are in crisis. The question now is, how does each protagonist respond to their situations? Aurelio, it is clear, is powerless. He is responsible for a family and will be killed if he doesn't cooperate with the mayor. Jig, too, is powerless, but her position is more subtle. Clearly, she does not want the abortion. She feels the emptiness of her relationship and wants something more fulfilling than the carefree, unburdened life of travels and parties. That's all we do, isn't it? Look at things and try new drinks? But she seems incapable of making a decision on her own, as suggested by the fact that much of her dialogue consists of questions rather than statements. Now there's some form and content for you. There's the form. Could we try it with water? Is it good with water? Even when ordering at the bar, she relies on her partner to decide which drink to choose and how to drink it. When the conversation turns to the abortion question, the same pattern is evident. Then what will we do afterwards? What makes you think so? And you think we'll be all right and be happy? And you really want to? Later we see that the woman understands that the relationship has changed permanently, probably that it is dead, and she is quite assertive. When the man desperately insists that they can have the whole world again, she forcefully and wisely retorts, "No, we can't, it isn't ours anymore." Sadly, however, by the end, she succumbs to the man's will and decides to continue to live the lie that their relationship has become. She comes back in the shade and smiles, putting on a false social face. "I feel fine," she said. "There's nothing wrong with me. I feel fine." The woman is defeated, and the reader feels pity for her. Okay, let's unpack that. There are three things I want to point out here that are really good tips for quite advanced writing. The first thing is, why so little purple? I've been spending the last 3 videos or whatever telling you that you have to do the tell, show, explain thing, and there's very, very little explain. Well, at the highest level of writing, all of these things blend into each other. You can't, and it's impossible to actually color things up. And the better the essay is, the harder it is for me to actually separate these two components, because when you're giving evidence, you're at the same time explaining it. That's good writing. Okay. Now, if you're just starting this stuff, if you're in grade 10, 11, and 12 even, or first year university, make sure you can identify your explain. Otherwise, your teachers might nail you for it. Here's an example of how the purple stuff is actually blended in with the blue stuff. What's this doing? She comes back in the shade and smiles, putting on a false social face. That's just providing more evidence about how she succumbs. This is my claim, that she succumbs, and here's my proof. But at the same time, I'm kind of extending this in the shade. So she's in the shade and she's back hiding again. So what does shade imply? It implies that she's hiding. What does hiding imply? She puts on a false social face. Okay. So the better you get at writing, the more integrated all of your components become. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about was the form. Form equals content, form equals content. Got to burn that into your head. And the question that I try to get my students to remember is the why A, why not B. This whole paragraph, and I like it, it's a good paragraph, it all revolves around the answer to that question, why A, why not B. You read a story, you see the word dust repeated 3 times. That's form that the writer gave you. Ask yourself, why is there dust? Why isn't there sunshine? Why dust? Why not sunshine? Okay, so what question, can you find it? What's the answer to the question, why A, why not B? What form is being decoded in this paragraph? Can you see it? If you might not know where the word syntax. Syntax means the grammatical structure, the sentence structure. Questions, questions, questions. As I was reading through this, I had my scholarly eyes on, glasses on, and I was reading through it. And I say, where are the symbols? Well, here are the symbols. And I looked at the symbols in the past one, the train line and the shade and all that stuff. But in this part, I was looking at, and I noticed, look at all these questions. Look at all these questions. She keeps asking question after question after question. That's not an accident. Remember, there are no accidents. Form equals content. The writer gives you the form, and the writer chooses the form. It's all about authorial choice. So the author chose to have her speak in a lot of questions. What do questions imply? That's the next question you ask. We've got the banana, not the apple. What does banana imply? That an apple might not. and then you get really deep analysis. So the fact that she's speaking all in question suggests that she's weak-willed. She doesn't know herself. She's kind of afloat and adrift. It's quite nice. And then you build this whole argument around that. One more thing that's quite sophisticated is, remember in the previous video I said I very often ask my students to have a claim, prove the hell out of that claim, explain the claim, and then see if you can find the opposite. See if you can find the opposite of what you believe to be true. And we found it here. It's actually true. Look at this. She's quite assertive. Well, I just spent quite a bit of time proving that she's not assertive, that she's actually kind of weak-willed and doesn't really know herself very well. But here's some evidence that she actually is. And so the Hemingway is not making her a complete write-off as a human being. She does have some kind of will, and it's struggling to make itself felt. So you, as a sophisticated reader, have to understand sophisticated writing and say, yes, she does. In the end, we come back here. She is defeated, of course. But we see her struggling to exert her will in the world. It's quite nice stuff. And the sophisticated reading to see both sides of that. Okay, now let's get on to the Marquez story. So, in contrast to the woman who was defeated, in contrast, despite his powerlessness, Aurelio maintains a powerful sense of dignity throughout the entire story. The mayor demands to see the dentist, but Aurelio tells his son to tell him that no one is home. When the son is afraid because the mayor hears Aurelio working, the father is cool and confident. The dentist kept examining the tooth. Only when he had put it on the table with the finished work did he say, "So much the better." Working methodically, without hurrying throughout the procedure, Aurelio maintains a sense of professionalism surprising for one whose life is at risk. He even has the courage to accuse the mayor of murder and to admit his satisfaction in his small opportunity for revenge. Now you'll pay for our 20 dead men. Yet even at this emotional moment, we sense a remarkable strength of character. Aurelio is never overcome by hatred, fear, or anger. He is without rancor and speaks rather with a bitter tenderness. Although ultimately powerless, Aurelio maintains his dignity and almost superhuman self-control. For this we admire him, and although we may sympathize with his predicament, we do not need to pity him. This is a really good paragraph. It does all the things that you have to do. It's got the red, the blue, and the purple, the tell, show, explain, all nicely laid out. But it also does something else. It unifies. It's very unified. And the whole essay is unified, by the way, and you might not know what unified means. You've probably heard your teachers talk about it. Make sure your essays and paragraphs are unified. But what does it mean? Well, this is what it means. It means to sprinkle throughout your paragraph and the essay those key ideas. Now, can you see what my key idea here is in this paragraph? I've made it red for you. It's your tell. It's your main claim. The claim is that he has a sense of dignity. Well, where do I repeat that? Cool and confident, sense of professionalism, strength of character, self-control. And there might be some other elements in there as well. You have to do that. If you're not doing that, you're not keeping your reader on track. You're not keeping yourself focused on your thesis. This is actually a topic sentence. It's your claim, but you can think of it as your thesis. And if you're not concentrating on it, you're going to lose. You might lose yourself as a writer. Do you ever get accused of writing off topic? Well, you might be going off topic because you're not keeping yourself nailed down to the page. These kinds of the repetition of these kinds of phrases, it pins you. It's like a little pin that keeps you on track and forces you to say what you want to say and not all this other garbage that's not required. Related to that is this. The word pity actually echoes in the word dignity right here. We leave here with her feeling sad, and then in contrast we see the dignity. Well, those opposites actually, the presence of white indicates a black. The presence of black indicates a white, even if it's not there. It kind of brings to mind these different elements. So that's part of the unification as well. Okay. Now, let's just quickly read the conclusion, and we'll leave this lesson. Stories can often be thought of as experiments. The author puts certain characters into certain situations to see how they will behave. In Hills Like White Elephants and One of These Days, we see how, under stress, people reveal their true nature. One of the great benefits of reading literature, then, is that we can play out these experiments in the safety of our own minds, asking ourselves, perhaps like subconsciously, if we are timid and ineffectual like Hemingway's protagonist or noble and dignified like Marquez's. Okay, so there's your conclusion. Just to wrap it up, don't forget your works cited if you're using quotes. And join me in the last lesson of this series, and I'll walk you through the 3 different requirements for the conclusion. And as usual, I provide lots of models for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.